everybody, and thanks for joining us. You know you're in for a treat when you hear that music because it's time for another episode of the Rec.poker podcast. This is the Forums edition. I'm your host, Jim Reid, Bluff Storini in the home games. And if you want to find out more about me, you can go to rec.poker/crew because it takes a crew of like-minded poker enthusiasts to make things work around here. So we got to thank our sponsors at Website AMP and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And of course, I also want to thank these members of the Wrecking Crew. Chris, why don't you lead us off?
Well, I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on Twitter and 5x5 on PokerStars.
And I'm Poker Geek MN, or I'm John Somsky, also known as Poker Geek MN everywhere.
And I'm Keith Brandt, and that's Monkey System everywhere.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I'm Fergie56 on the home games. I'm Pet Vet or Pet Vet 33 everywhere else.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Radman50 just about everywhere.
Thanks, gang. I've got the best job in the world. So every Monday night, I get to hang out with recreational poker wizards like these and talk about poker. That's what we do at Rec Poker. We talk about poker, we have fun, we play in free play money home games, and we all get better together. So if that sounds like fun, all it takes is an email address and a smile. Come and sign up yourself. So one of the things I love about Rec Poker is pulling out hands from the Rec Poker forums and talking about them here on the air like we do every week. So this week, we're looking at one from our very own Rob Rabman50 Washam. And it's about a hand where he's playing pocket jacks. And Rob, what are the three correct ways to play pocket jacks?
There is no correct way to play pocket jacks. There's three ways to play pocket jacks, and they're all wrong.
Oh, is that it?
That's absolutely it. So I think that's a standard rule. Everybody knows it. I don't know where you're coming from, Jim.
Just always seems to go so well for me. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So you were in a spot here on America's Card Room, right?
Yep. I was playing ACR, tournament at ACR. I had about 54 big blinds. I was in middle position. Under the gun player raises to 2.2 off of a, let's see, what did he have? He had a 74 big blind stack. And it folds around to me, and I raised it to 6.5 big blinds. It folds the rest of the way, and the under the gun player calls. Okay, so we go to a flop, and the flop is 4 deuce 5 with 2 spades. So it's definitely a flop that would hit the big blind, but we're not in that situation. We're heads up, but we're under the gun against an under the gun player, and he did not re-raise me, so he's kind of capped his range. You know, he doesn't have pocket aces, pocket kings, probably not even ace king. You know, there's a lot of hands that we can take out of his range. But he still has a lot of those mid pocket pairs. He's got a lot of suited Broadway type hands. He's got a lot of ace suited type hands. So he still has a lot of that in his range. So I decided that I was probably ahead at this point in time. And on the flop, I decided to bet 10.23 big blinds, which is right around 2/3 pot, I think.
So at this point, so he checks the flop, and there's about 15 and a half big blinds in the middle, and the flop is 5 of spades, 4 of spades, 2 of clubs. So he's probably, is this player, when you 3-bet, do you think this player is 4-betting like pocket queens at that point? Can we take queens out of his range when he calls?
I'm not sure.
But kings and aces, right?
Kings and aces for sure we can take out of his range. I think queens too. Just a feeling I have. Mm-hmm. This guy has been pretty active. I played 82 hands with him, and he was a 38-21-8.
Okay, yeah, so, that's a pretty good sample size for that.
So he's 40% of the time he's been in, almost 40% of the time he's been in the pot, and he raises, and he's been 3-betting somewhat, not as much as some people, but so relatively aggressive. So I think he could be definitely coming over the top with a hand like queens.
So we don't want to. So and we've got the jack of spades, so we're blocking some of those suited Broadway combos that we don't want to see here. But he could have some of the sets, I guess, if he's going to call a 3-bet out of position with 2s, 4s, and 5s. It's a little wide, but
that's pretty wide. I think I didn't put him on any of the sets. I really didn't put him on any sets. At, 5 high flop, and he was under the gun opening, and then calls a 3-bet.
There's only one guy on this panel. Only one guy on this panel that I know is a mandatory pocket 5s player. But yeah.
Did he have a fold to 3-bet, like at all? Like, does he ever fold 3-bets?
I'd have to go back and look at the stats. I didn't take a note of that.
I hope you make those assumptions against me, Rob.
Well, no, see, you're a totally different player.
So then
you make assumptions versus that specific player.
It's true. So then if we're saying he can't have queens plus and he can't have 5s negative, 5s minus.
I think he can. I think he can have all
he
pairs.
could, but I didn't feel that he did.
So then he's got
moment in time I wasn't considering it.
Yeah. So then he's got some suited aces that are combo draws now, right? He's got some flush draws with an ace. He's got some
other suited Broadways, probably.
Yep. Other suited Broadways.
Yeah.
We've got the jack, but he could definitely have king queen or king jack or queen 10 or ace
queen 10.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of those ones. And that's probably the bulk of his range that continues if we've described it right. I mean, I guess he could check call with like 6s through 10s too. I guess he might not be folding, just check folding in a 3-bet pot even.
Yeah, if you look at some of the ranges, like whether you're going to Poker Coaching or Range Trainer Pro or whatever, you're looking at a call 3-bet range. Yeah, you just said what it was. That basically is what it is. It's those pairs, it's those suited aces, and those suited Broadways.
Right. So I have it in Odin, and I have him like the suited aces, but not very many of them. Like ace 10 suited and up. I have him 4-betting the ace kings, queens, most of the jacks, and some of the aces, but flatting aces sometimes to protect his flatting range. So, and then the pairs 5 and up. That's it.
So
sounds right.
We are really ahead of almost every hand in that range. So we're not, when you count that their flush draws and stuff have a lot of equity and some of their combo draws, we might not be jumping for joy equity wise against that part of their range, but it's hard for us to be, if you told us that they were never going to deal a turn or a river, I would tell you that we were ahead here almost 100% of the time. So
Rob, was this guy limping?
No,
he wasn't limping. Okay.
No, he was never limping. He was definitely, to me, when somebody is in a tournament like this and they never limp in an ACR tournament, and this was a small tournament, probably a $3 tournament or something. If they're never limping, I feel that they're a little more studied than a lot of the people that you see that just come in and limp all kinds of garbage.
Yeah.
So I felt that his range was exactly what Kim said.
Wait till I tell you what Odin wants you to do.
Let's get there.
Yeah. So anyway, he checks.
I bet he calls. He checks. I bet he calls.
No. Let's talk about your bet on the flop.
I bet 2/3 pot.
Okay. Let me just tell you what they want you to do. And that is overbet shove 76% of the time with jacks.
Wow.
Does it matter if you have the jack of spades or not?
Yes, jack of spades is more often.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I had the jack of spades. So
jack of spades, jack of clubs, exactly, which blocks a bunch of flush draws. They want you to do it more often.
Because clubs is the back door.
76% of the time. Yeah. But it's 74, 76. It's not like, it's not huge. But they just want an overbet 200 and something % of the pot shove.
I kind of love
75%
that,
of the
honestly,
time.
because just like we were talking about, we're definitely ahead of almost every hand in their range right now, but we don't want to see any more cards. And we want to give them, and like, even with your 2/3 pot bet size there, they're not really getting the right odds to continue to the next street, because you're going to follow up on the next street. So maybe by the rule of 4, they're getting the right odds to come along, although even out of position, I'm not sure that's true. But,
and if you don't do that, they want you to make a small 1/3 pot size bet.
because you're going to be doing that with a bunch of the other parts of your range. Interesting.
So
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I really like the big bet. I think you're on the right track here in this spot. I was thinking pot size, but that's really interesting. Odin goes like, that is not a gear I have in my game but I think I need to, and I think it's a really interesting when we're in these spots where we've got almost assuredly the best hand, but pretty much there are like so many death cards that are about to come. Like there's not other than a jack. This is just like it's going to be a miserable turn experience. I like it.
Right. Plus, Odin wants them to call when they have a lot of the time when they have 10s, 9s, and 8s.
Wow.
And 7s.
Just because this particular board, it's hard to have a value range on.
Well, 6s are probably 6s and 7s are maybe even better than 8s and 9s.
Yeah,
right.
good
They
point.
want them to call all the time with all the 6s and 7s they got there with. And most of the time with the 8s, 9s, and 10s.
Now, I should point out,
when we do that, we can, yeah.
Oh, I should point out to our listeners that Odin and programs like that assume that everyone at the table is playing in a GTO way, so that they're responding with the correct ranges and frequencies. That might not be the case. It's not the case in the games that we're playing in. But
when we overbet shove there, I think we can get called by 10s and 9s, like a lot of the time.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because they're looking at an overcard to the board with
over pairs. And what do we have? We have ace, king of club of spades, or we have like
ace, king, ace, queen of spades, and then we're just jamming over the top with our nut flush draw.
But they shouldn't be fist pumping at that idea either. They don't want to get it in against 2 overs with a flush draw. So that's an interesting question. So Kim, when we're shoving our pocket jacks here, our blackjacks. What other hands are we also making that big overbet shove with, other than those strong pairs?
Let me just tell you then,
because it wouldn't surprise me if the ace of spades was involved in
some of the times with ace king.
Yep.
I don't know which ace kings. I'd have to click on it. I can click on it. So ace king suited, we're doing it with ace king of hearts and ace king of diamonds. All the non-flush draws.
The non-flush draws.
And
poker is so weird, guys. Why is poker so weird?
And then with the pocket queens, we're also doing it with queen of hearts, queen of diamonds. We're doing it almost 100% of the time. And when the other queens are variable, but when we have the queen of clubs, we're doing it about half the time. And when we have the queen of spades, we're doing it about a quarter of the time.
Interesting.
So and then jacks, we do it more because queens don't need as much protection as jacks.
Right.
Right. And we're never doing it with aces and kings.
Because we can win without having to.
And occasionally we do it with ace 7 suited and occasionally with ace jack and ace 10 offsuit. But I guess that's dependent on suits there.
And the ace 7 suited, is that the spades? Is that that's the flush draw suit that we're choosing to get?
Yeah, ace 7 of spades. Yeah.
So that's a tough range to play against if you're that other player, right? If you're making huge over bets with a mix of strong pocket pairs and nut flush draws and that kind of thing.
So it's saying to jam. So it's actually, I've got, what do I have in my stack at that point in time? I've got 47 big blinds. So it's 3x pot really is what I'm jamming.
Yeah.
It's more, you started the hand with 53, I think. So
yep.
Yeah, so 45. I put in 6 and change. So yeah,
so
about 3.
I got 45 big blinds at least. So that'd be 3x pot.
Three
No,
X
it's not.
pot.
The pot's. I have the pot down as 20 big blinds.
Oh, it looks
So
like
it was 15.5 big blinds.
yeah, 15.5.
Going in.
So
the flop.
that's the other thing. Your 3-bet wasn't big enough.
Well, yeah.
Let's just go back
Yes.
to that because
Yeah.
it wasn't.
No,
it was really small.
That's true.
Really small. You don't want to do that with jacks. You want a nice big hefty one with jacks.
That's very true.
Like at least 7.5.
Yep, I was just clicking buttons, and that is most of the reaction that I got on the forums from people that responded. That was their exact thing that they said. It should have been at least 7.5 big blinds.
Right. And you would agree with that too, right, Rob?
Oh, I totally agree with that. I was just clicking buttons at the time, and I got up to about 6.5. Oh, that's big enough. And I just went, I wasn't really considering the whole thing because most of the time when I 3-bet, people were folding.
Right.
So it didn't matter what I 3-bet, people were just folding. So I wasn't using the optimal bet size when I was 3-betting.
But it's an under the gun range. Under the gun range makes their range tighter. So you have to 3-bet a little more there, I think.
Yep. Oh, I agree. I agree 100%. After reviewing it, it's just a slam dunk. I should have went to 7.5 or 8.
Yeah, I like the, and it was a pretty small open. So, 7.5, something like that. I think that's all in the right territory. And we have enough chips in people's stacks that we don't need to size all the way down.
Right. And I still would have had a 15. It would have been, maybe 17 big blinds now.
Right.
If I went to 7.5, so we'd have 17 big blinds, and I still had 3x pot.
Yep.
So regardless of what my bet size was, if we got here, I'd still have it'd be 3x pot that I'd be jamming with, which it makes my brain hurt.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to think about a range of hands you're going to be jamming with there, right? Like in real time. Right. And then choosing the other hands to use in the smaller bet size.
And I think one of the things about this too, to really like think about this so that you're not just being like, oh, when I have pocket jacks and it's an overpair and I'm in this spot, I'm going to jam. Like, I think Odin is taking this because of the exact nature of this board, right? Like, it's a flush draw board, but they're all really low cards. It's very unlikely that our opponent really spiked this very much. Like, if this is the same situation, but it's what's a 5, 6, 8 or something like that, or 6, 7, 9 with the same, like with a 2 spades. I don't think we're doing this as much. We still have the overcard factor, but I think our opponent's potential can hit that a lot hot in a much bigger ratio.
I think because we're talking about an under the gun range as opposed to a big blind range.
Right.
Yep, that makes sense.
All right, let's go to the turn.
So
the turn was a beautiful card for somebody, not me. It was a 3 of clubs bringing in the straight and the flush.
Yeah, I think that was
it's the second backdoor. Yeah, it's the second flush draw.
Yeah, only the 3 of spades is the only worst card in the
yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
So the 3 of clubs comes, so the flop is now 5, 4, 3, 2 with 2 spades and 2 clubs. And our best case scenario earlier was that we were up against a kind of flush draw and likely one that had an ace in it. And all those have now improved to straights. So we're not loving life when we see that card.
Yeah, I was not very happy.
Now we're going to have a lot of aces in our 3-betting range too, of course.
Right.
But we didn't bring any with us today for this hand, unfortunately. No, we're stuck with these 2 jacks.
Let's talk about it. Let's say we had ace king.
Mm-hmm.
And we make this 3-bet. And we have the ace of spades or clubs. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
What do we do on the turn? Now, on this turn, I checked.
Yep.
He checked to me and I checked back. So now if I had ace king, do I check back there?
No. Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
let's talk about what you're supposed to do with jacks first. You're supposed to bet small, 10% of the pot, like 3 or 4 big blinds.
Just
That's
giving them
what
a
they want.
chance,
That's
giving them a
to where I
chance to
want you to
fold.
Okay.
just saying, I have the ace here, you know, buddy. If you have pocket sixes, you can raise me, but otherwise, like, you know, like you're
Go
just
away.
supposed to bet small.
And how much of our range takes that action according to
A
Odin?
lot. A7 suited, King 8 suited. Some of the cards that we're still in here with when played this way. Like
Yeah.
I redid it to be played Rob's way with the smaller bet and then the call and then this turn. So some of our queens, some of our kings check, some of our kings bet small, some of them checks. Most of our aces bet small like this. And then like a couple of them check. But our ace king of hearts wants to bet a lot, like the pot.
Mm-hmm. So we still
like,
have those two sizes
So
here.
we're
they
trying
want
to
you all
deny.
in. They
We're
want you
trying
all
to
in
deny
with ace
equity
king.
to those flush draws.
That
So
makes
ace
sense.
king of hearts and ace king of diamonds, they want you just all in.
Right.
Yep.
Most
Right.
of the time. Right?
And then you'd think that would be true for the other aces in that case, because you're not actually really playing ace king at that point. Like even if
Well,
a king comes, it's not going to make any difference on the
It doesn't
river.
really have us here with any of the other aces except
Oh,
ace
right. That
7.
makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Cool.
So our
So-
offsuit kings, they like it done when we have the king. Looks like they like it when it's the ace. Oh, that's all over the map. But it's all over
Yeah,
the
that's the
map.
thing about solvers is it tells you what it would do, but it doesn't tell you why. So it can be a little tricky to analyze. That's why I like
Looks
bringing in
like when
smart
we have the
people.
king of clubs and when we have the ace of clubs, but not the ace of clubs, king of spades. So all the other ones. It's very amusing.
Yeah, Chris, what's that sound to you?
Oh, I was just curious about the other aces. So we don't have any wheel aces here. We don't have like ace 5.
We have no
suited.
wheel. We should never arrive to this point with any wheel aces. Correct.
Now we might have 3-bet them pre-flop, but we would have played the flop differently. Is that what we're saying?
We would have played this differently. Yeah.
Okay. So there are some really great
All right, so it
responses. Yeah, sorry, Rob, take it, baby.
Yeah, it goes check, and most of the responses I got, everybody agreed that I should be checking back this with jacks. Now, nobody's running solvers on it necessarily. This is just everybody's
So a bet
opinions as to
small
how
bet,
it was played.
though. A small bet is very close to doing a check, but it's not a check,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and I
Right.
think, and Rob made this great point just a few minutes ago about how if we're never checking when we have the ace, then that does make a good argument for making that small bet a size that we apply to a lot more of our range with other value hands like this, because we don't want to make a big bet with pocket jacks, but we still don't want to tell them that we don't have an ace, which I can tell you're worried you kind of do here when you check back.
Well, and that's at the beginning of the post. I mentioned that I screwed up on the turn,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why I felt I screwed up on the turn, because I broadcast to him.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, look, I don't have an ace."
Now, one thing
And-
that I always think about here is this a player that's going to bluff raise me? Because I don't mind betting jacks and folding to a raise if I know that they're doing it with an ace. Because that's just, I feel like I can lose the minimum that way, to be honest with you sometimes. So when you get notes on players that they don't bluff raise, then they're a great candidate for like a small, thin value bet here and just planning to fold to a raise. But with the double suited board, I feel like many players are going to find some draws or non-locked up ace hands to get me off here when I make those small bets. How do you guys handle that in real time? Is it just is that why we just have that smaller sizing here so that we can do this and fold comfortably? I don't mind getting bluffed every once in a while too. I just don't like putting myself.
What are they going to raise with here when we bet? When we bet the flop and then bet the turn, what are they raising with?
As a bluff, it would have to be like 2 spades that don't have the ace. That's the only thing I can think of that is a semi bluff here.
Yeah, or clubs maybe. I mean,
Right.
they're kind of the same at this point, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but not the best one, or else you'd have the straight.
Right.
And we're still ahead of those.
Yeah, good point.
So this is the interesting thing about this. I like the bet, and I don't like the bet that Odin's like. I'm trying to think about this. Like I always think about betting as
well. Don't
like,
forget that. Yeah, don't forget that Odin didn't want us to make that bet on the flop.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we got to the turn with a slightly different.
Well,
range.
I'm just trying to figure it out or think about it, because like when we make a bet, we want to have a target, right? We want to understand what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to fold out a better hand? Are we trying to get a worse hand to call us? And I guess to me, when we bet on this turn, we are trying to get a worse hand to. Are we trying to? We're not. I mean, there's no way a flush draw is folding to that small amount, right?
Right.
So are we trying? Seems like we're targeting the 6s through 10s that we actually want to keep in. That's where I'm struggling with this. Like, what are we trying to accomplish?
So we're betting our kings and our aces here, right? With the same amount, right? And they're
King X and ace X, you mean?
Yeah, and like king queen offsuit, like so. They want you to do it with king queen offsuit when you're here as well, with the queen of spades in your hand. So I mean, there's a bunch of hands that are bluffs that we can also be doing it with, and some value hands.
Okay.
So we're protecting our bluffs, basically.
I guess we're betting small to protect our ability to bluff at this more.
Like, yeah, really, almost the only thing they want us to overbet with when we've made, like, we're not supposed to have very many jacks in our range at this point, right? We're supposed to, is our ace kings. They're the only ones that we're sort of betting bigger with.
Yeah.
So
because they've already made a straight.
They've already made a straight, plus they have, like, especially our suited ones, they want us to be really betting small with our ace king of spades and our ace king of clubs.
So those are value
with our red
bets.
aces.
Yeah.
Red
And
ace
they want
kings
us to bet big with our other aces.
to deny equity for the
Right.
flush draws.
Right.
Even though it's still a value bet. That's very interesting. So the ones where we're blocking, it's a value bet, and but we choose a different sizing. I think that's very cool.
Because you can get called by, when you do that small sizing with the ace king of spades, you can get called by a lower flush draw.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if the
Dream
flush comes
scenario.
in on the river, you can get all the money in, and you're going to get their entire stack.
And that is how, again, it doesn't matter that much in tournament poker where the stacks get shallow pretty quickly. But in cash games, flush over flushing somebody can be a huge boost to your win rate. And it's something that you can control in a way that you can't in like a set over set kind of a circumstance. So having that top flush is a very valuable spot.
Interesting hand, though.
Yeah.
So
we're not even there yet. So
we checked and
we checked back.
We check back, and then the river comes another wonderful card. The two of spades.
Oh, God.
Which puts the original straight or original flush on the board.
Yep.
And paired the board. So if this guy was sitting there with pocket fives, he now has a full house. So there's a straight, there's a full house, there's a flush out there. So he turns around and donk bet. Well, not a donk bet because we checked the turn, but he led out on the river for a little over half pot, 19 big blinds. So if you think about this, now we can talk about what Odin's going to do or whatever, but in game, what bluffs am I beating right now?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any? Because everything got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, every spade combo got there. The aces have the straight.
Yep.
Yeah, is he turning exactly pocket sevens?
Yeah,
Drew nines into a.
that's basically it, right? Pocket sevens through tens. If somebody's turning that into a bluff, that's a pretty rare player. This is a trivial fold for me. I'm just at this point, like I think there are earlier streets where we could have played this differently, but like this is just an easy snap fold.
Yeah, what's everyone else thinking when you see this nightmare card and then the lead?
Just so you know, he's supposed to do this with his pocket nines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, that's the thing. Like, yeah, right. But that is a rare. Like Odin may do that, but I don't think a $6.
Only when you have the nine of spades in your hand.
Yeah, that's not happening on ACR at a $6 tournament.
You need to be able to visualize your entire range and your opponent's entire range and this board texture to then decide, oh yeah, pocket nines is a really good bluff candidate actually here. I can get him to fold pocket jacks with a jack of spades.
And did you say this was a $3 tournament on ACR?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think they're following over. They don't have pocket nines.
And this is something we talk about from time to time behind the scenes too, is that, we're recreational poker players. The players that we're playing against are taking like Odin lines against us. So it's good for us to think about what is the GTO play so that we know in which direction to deviate. But I think, the real art for us is figuring out which errors are these players making and how to capitalize on those most rather than assuming that they're finding pocket nines.
It's like a trivial fold here. Right? It's an easy fold here, but I mean, it'd be interesting if we hadn't made that small bet on the turn. What might have happened, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if I'd made the small bet on the turn, and
got raised,
it's easy to fold.
Yeah.
Right.
And if he
just calls and we go to the river and he donks into me now.
It's also an easy fold.
It's an easy fold.
Mm-hmm. But I guess one difference is
more.
That's it. Yep. Chris said it, because you're not weakening your own perceived range there.
Because I've left the straight in my range by betting on the turn.
Mm-hmm.
So again, at the beginning I talked about I thought my mistake was on the turn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we're finding out, there's probably a couple other mistakes. I should have raised. My 3-bet should have been bigger. I should have bet maybe, I think one of the bets that I think that I'm starting to work on is at pot size or 1 1/4 pot size bet. And maybe that's the type of bet that we could have done on the flop.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to work on that 2 times pot size bet. It's just not in my. It's not in my.
I know
arsenal right now.
I think is really interesting. And I will say I just did this on Range Trainer Pro, which doesn't do as many sizings as Odin. They don't do a 10%. It's like they do kind of like a small bet and a big bet and a check. Basically, the options they give it. And in that case, the jacks become a check on the turn. So that's good to think about. Like. Because I don't often make 10% bets, and so I need to. But that there are cases where we might want to work those into our game a little and think about the spots as well as the 2x ones. Like both of these are interesting uses of both of those sizing differences.
And it wouldn't surprise me if those sizing differences, if those sizing options accompanied each other from flop texture to flop texture, because it's going to be boards like this where you get those big over bets, not exclusively, but it's going to be those boards where you can have a mix of really nutted hands and then really strong equity hands with poor showdown value. And those are going to be what make these big over bets. And so it makes sense to have a smaller sizing for other parts of your range there. Keith, do you have something? Yeah.
Yeah. Which database did you use, Chris, in Range Trainer Pro?
The post flop, I did the 60 big blind 3-bet. I had to do, because it's not the exact situation. I had to do the cutoff versus EP, because it's this was like hijack versus EP. So
that's a close enough approximation, I guess.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out which one to use, but they didn't zero right in on it.
Yeah, and that's poker, isn't it? I mean, you're never going to find exactly the spot, but we can kind of learn some general rules from stuff like this and apply that to our game going forward. So all in all, I think you probably, if they told you, Rob, what the run out was going to be, if you could tell them that you're only going to put one bet in on the flop, I think we'd say congratulations. You probably lost the minimum given how bad that board was going to be.
I think that's what Eric Anderson ended up saying in his response. I think he played it for max EV. So basically, I didn't lose as much as I could have.
Yeah, that's it. We got some great comments in here. Eric Anderson is such a fun character. He's a great member here, and he's very often posting in the forums. But we also heard from Sir Gasleak, who our listeners have probably heard as well. Taylor Moss and Miss Click Donkey, Tim Fritz, also putting some great comments in there. So thanks to all of them. And any other thoughts on this subject, gang, before we...
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say was he only makes a 50% pot bet on the river. And it's just a very sort of confusing sizing, right? Unless he's just clicking buttons as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not exactly. See, it's not exactly polarizing. Half.
But it's not
exactly half. He didn't click the half.
He didn't click half pot. Saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not really polarizing one way or the other. So is he doing this with pocket sevens, pocket eights, pocket nines, pocket tens as well?
I don't
know.
He could
because Rob showed weakness on the turn.
Well, like I was going to say, I have this little tab on the bottom of my monitor that says they always have it. So when they're betting the river, they always have it at these low stakes.
Yeah.
I read this.
You're better off just folding.
I read this as a flush because they're scared of the paired board. They're not going to polarize themselves, but they want to get value from the straights if you've got them, or like jacks if you're going to call.
So they're going to fold to a shove. So Rob should have shoved.
They could actually fold to a shove.
Now that's a good point. So that's one thing we haven't talked about. Even though they are not bluffing here, and we're saying this player type on this run out with this action, we didn't find a lot of bluffs for them. So maybe they could have some unnatural bluffs. They just choose, I'm going to bluff this guy right here, whatever. But even if they don't feel like they're bluffing, that doesn't mean that they don't have hands in their betting range that they will fold to a raise. Mm-hmm. So if we told them,
I should have bluffed.
Maybe you could have bluffed, maybe you could have bluffed here. And gotten them to fold a low flush or something with that pot.
I have a hard time turning jacks into a bluff.
And honestly, I just don't think this player that we're describing here is a good target for that play. Right. For the same reason that Chris talked about, they're not really thinking about the board texture and the sizing and the hand strength.
So Rob, when you're turning your jacks into a bluff, make it at least 3 times the raise.
I've learned that.
All right. Well, I don't think we're going to top that. That's what we call a callback here in the comedy industry. So I'd like to thank Rob. Thanks for sharing that great post with us today. Keith, John, Kim, and Chris, website AMP and Running Aces, Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and you, the listeners. Thank you so much.